So it's pretty tense. I'll just read a little bit further, and let's see how much to finish this chapter, because it makes a point at the end. Maybe I'll jump ahead. When he woke up the next morning, he found his lower body wrapped in a thick blanket. Someone had sewn up part of the wounds, but he was weak with the loss of blood. Rafi was not around, and neither was Omar. Only Farouk and one of his assistants were there, which, I mean, my name was also Farouk. I wrote the book, so it's kind of a play in this, that I'm also part of the villain. Farouk. In the front of the shop was closed to outsiders by a blue plastic sheet that hung across the entrance. He drifted back to sleep and did not remember anything for the next 2 days. When he did wake up, he was almost faint with hunger. He tried to call for the shop assistant, but his throat was rough and dry. After a few minutes, the boy saw him and called Farouk. They fed him some old rice and dal from a plate that had been sitting in the corner, but he heard Farouk say to the boy, "Not too much. Beggars have to look thin." Rafi wants him to look hungry when he reaches Dhaka. It was rather a strange comment, according to Khosrow, because he hardly ate any food anyway, and his legs were little more than skin draped across bones. That evening, Rafi came to see him and brought Tariq, still wearing his police uniform, with him. "He already looks like a beggar," Tariq noted with a smile. "He should do well." Tariq has some history in this. He's the police officer. He's corrupt. He just comes around and causes problems all the time. So he's with this guy. Khosrow tried to sit up, but without his legs to balance him, he could do little more than roll, push himself up with his arms. Pain was still intense, though it was no longer throbbed. It was more of an itching and burning, and never relented. His blanket was removed, and it stank of urine. It's a urine night. Human waste, some poop. So Khosrow had been relieving himself without even the awareness of his body's activities. The stumps were clotted over, and there was thread where someone had sewn the open wound shut. Khosrow found himself crying involuntarily. He was weak and could not prop himself up long. He reclined in the corner and looked sadly up at Tariq. "Pathetic, that's it. Now just stick out your hand and say, 'Please, sir, I'm hungry.' If you practice that, you'll pay off your debt in no time." A shiver went through Khosrow's body. He would never walk again. He couldn't believe it. Tears were rolling down his cheeks, and he began to wail out in a long, boyish moan. "Hey," Rafi said, growing angry, "stop it. Stop that." The boy continued, and Tariq took his rifle, which had sitting against the wall, and knocked him gently on the forehead with his butt. Khosrow fell back to the floor and began to writhe. Tariq shook his head in disapproval, saying, "You better get him out of here. He's well enough." "Tariq says I should cut your tongue out," Rafi said, leaning over Khosrow's anguished body. "What do you say?" Khosrow turned his head away. He didn't know what to say. It all seemed like a losing game to him. He couldn't say anything correct, so he kept silent. "What will you say when someone asks you what happened? What happened, boy? How'd you lose your legs? What will you say? Brother Rafi? Is that what you'll say?" At first he was silent, but then he decided to make a quick answer. "No," Khosrow whined. "It was a train accident. Remember that? A terrible train accident. Say it." Tariq took the butt of his rifle, pressed it against the boy's thin chest. "Say it, or do you want me to cut out your tongue?" "A train. It was a train. Rafi saved your life. If he hadn't called a doctor, you would have bled to death. Do you know that? You should thank him." "I don't think I can trust him," Rafi said, looking across. "Oh, give me a knife," Tariq said, setting his rifle against the wall. "I'll cut it out." Khosrow began to cry. "A train, it was a train. A train took my legs. Terrible train." He stretched out for Rafi's legs. "May Allah bless you, Uncle Rafi. You saved my life." His hands wavered in midair, unable to reach out to Rafi's white pajama-covered legs. His head was bowed, and he remained in this outstretched position for 2 or 3 seconds. "He's a liar, total liar. You hear that?" Rafi said, still giving Khosrow an angry glare. "Uncle Rafi," he said, invoking 2 or 3 Arabic blessings he knew to show his sincerity. Obviously, I'm not putting them all in here. I just put this there as a way of showing it. That's what he's doing. I think I'm going to just skip to the end. Basically, they don't do anything else to him. He just gets shipped up to Dhaka, and they're going to make him into a beggar. And so he's here, and I get to the end of the chapter, and I just say, how much more of Khosrow's story should I tell? How he lived in a dirty room with 7 other dismembered beggars, 2 blind, 3 missing hands, one like himself, one covered with black bulging sores, an underdeveloped frame, skeletally thin. How he worked, how he was escorted by another boy who pushed him around in a cart, which he was forced to rent each month. How his caretakers used to beat him to make him look more pathetic and steal his money from under his blanket at night when he tried to save some extra tips, as he called it. Becomes increasingly pathetic and tragic that he lives this way, receiving money from generous strangers only to have it pocketed by Rafi's friend in the city. After 1 year, he developed an eye disease, creating puffiness and redness around one eye. His caretakers, instead of calling a doctor, praised him for the additional blemish, which would only add to his weekly income, and by extension their pockets. Even from the standpoint of the narrator, it becomes too painful to recount the details. And I feel that I should just let him go as a character. Use the unpleasantness to sell the book, then toss the characters in the trash can. Except I don't have to toss them anywhere, I just have to walk away and move on. After all, it's only a story, and I have sympathy for these characters. It's just that I can't do everything for them. Even God seems to have turned his back on them. So how reasonable should I pretend to be? Goodbye, Khosrow. Goodbye. Good luck. Thus he disappears. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you very much.